Hello and welcome to Iceman channel. Something that I noticed the last months is that people are asking questions about standalone modes for the Proxmark3. What is a standalone mode? Well, a standalone mode is just a specific code that has been developed to let the Proxmark device run that code without any interactions from the Proxmark client. Well, almost. How does it work? Well, you would need the Proxmark to run on its own power source, like a battery. And you would also need to flash it with a particular mode that you want to have. That means that you need to configure and compile the repo for it. And then you would also need to learn how to operate it. All modes are different and act differently. We have today about 35 different standalone modes. They do things like sniffing, simulating, and more. One particular mode is called the HF UNISNIFF, and it does that. It has a lot of sniffing. And this video is about that particular mode. Let's get started. We start our journey in the Proxmark repo. Where do I find all the information about standalone modes? Well, there are several places. One of them is here. We go to the wiki and you go to the Standalone Modes wiki page entry. Here you can read a little bit about it and what it does, and it also gives you a list of all available standalone modes, and it also links directly to it. So if you press here, for instance, you will join into the source code part, and you can see here's another part of that information that you need. Usually it's in the source code where we document things, how this particular standalone mode works. You'll find it in the source code under the ARMS source and the folder standalone. That's where you all are. And that's a good place to start. Another part, when we go back, is down to Proxmark installation overview. In advanced compilation parameters, you have a standalone mode subsection, which tells you all of the different modes, but it doesn't link to it. And thirdly, I'm going back out here, is when you want to develop your own standalone mode, you can go down to notes and helpful documents, and you see a link to developing standalone mode, which informs you how to create your own standalone mode. So that's where we start with this one. Let's go into HF UNISNIFF. The first thing you need to do is actually to look at some help. And if you go to make help, the Proxmark help file will give you a whole list of options. And I made this a little bit clear because this is not so simple to remember just out of the box. Is this one here. If we go for make platform capital letters equals like this, it will give me a list of all these available standalone modes, like we were talking for the wiki and advanced compilation pages. You also have to make file from the client available, and this is the one I'm interested in. The next part you need to do is to look into a file called make platform. If you've never done this before, you only have make. I'm going to do this instead. You only have a sample file. The sample file is as it is. You can just rename it into the valid one, which is then make file platform. So you can just do move or copy make file platform sample to make file platform. And now you have that. Now you can go more make file.platform, because that's the file that this compilation setup is using. And you see different options. I will use the Nano. You can use it in the Visual Studio Code, or you want to do something else, but I'm going to use it in Nano just like that. It gives you some nice easy colors. And I have an RFID, so I'm keeping this one. If you have an Proxmark Easy or something, you would do like this. You can also see here that you can enable things like the BT add-on, flash memory, and I would say that you can do both like this as well. You would need to do BT add-on because I'm using the Proxmark RFID. I'm using RFID with a Blue Shark, which has a battery inside, and that makes me able to run this in its standalone mode version. So you would need to do same thing here if you have a Blue Shark on. If you have one of those modified Proxmarks Easy with flash, you would just enable it like that. And here is the critical part. This line here tells you which standalone mode is to be compiled in the project. And we took and copied the HF UNISNIFF, the name of it, and we pasted in like this. And that's all you need. That's all you need in this whole file. And then you save and exit and get out of it. And you will make a make J. And after that you would make a make PM3 flash full image. And then after that you will start the client like this. So let's do all those 3 steps in one. Okay, now we're in the Proxmark client, and we flashed and we compiled. And how do we verify that we have which version of standalone mode that is being compiled and flashed onto the device? Well, you run the command HW status, and you will see here installed standalone mode. You see that we got our HF UNISNIFF, and it says that it's in compile time. Default protocol is 14A, and we support flash. Great. Now what? This is where you install a standalone mode. Now you have to learn about it. And that makes us go back to the Visual Studio Code in order to look at this part. And oh god, I don't know if you can see this very well. Yeah, so in the source code for this mode, it starts explaining what it does. And it tells you that you can do for compilation time, you can tell it to do one of it. It can be which sniffing it should do. So you can do 14A, 14B, 15I class or user. The first 4 is kind of standard. You understand what it does. But the user mode means that it goes into a loop selecting, so you can actually press the button several times to select it around and choose which one it is. Then you realize now that you need to practice a bit to use this mode. And this is what we highly recommend. Read this source code here, is part of the documentation, and try to understand what's going on. This mode here uses this kind of way for the LEDs. It's not the same thing. It also supports something called a config file. So if you have a flash memory on your device, like I have on my RFID, you can actually upload a config file to the spiffs, and which is a plain text file, and you just tell it to what you want to do with this with trace logs. When you sniff, this collects all the data into a trace log in the RAM memory on the device, but on a device that has access to an external flash memory, we can also save it to it. And that is able to, with that, we are able to do a configuration file in this particular standalone mode. I have to emphasize on this one. It's not generic. So you can do something called save, and then you tell it what to do. New, append, or none. And then you can also say which protocol it's going to start to sniff. It's going to be 14A, 14B, 15. And I see this documentation hasn't been updated. So let's update it like this. So the config file should look like that. And if I go back to this part here, I'm going to exit the client again because we don't need to do that right now. And I'm going to do HF UNISNIFF HFUNISNIFF.conf file, which is a text file I have here, you see that it only has these two lines. Save equals new means that it's going to create a new file, a new trace file for every time we sniff, and it's going to be user selected. Okay, have that in mind. I have a config file locally on my computer. It is not on the device yet. So when I go into the Proxmark again, we have mem spiffs commands, and if I do tree, I can look into it, see what's saved on it. And here we don't have any file at all. So I have a standalone mode. We go back to the source code. We're in the Proxmark client and we need to do things. Here it starts saying how to retrieve the data once the standalone mode is done. And that is kind of confusing because it's two steps. So this is configuring before you do things, and now here is actually you going out using the mode, and then done, and then you go retrieving the data that was collected. Does that make sense? I think it does. So this is not super clear, but it's part of it. And it doesn't explain where you upload this spiffs mem config file either. But I can only show you this in the code so far. We need to go back into this part here, and you need to look at this little beautiful Proxmark. There's two ways to trigger a standalone mode. I will keep it connected to the USB cable right now because that will allow me to see debug statements coming from the mode to the client. I have battery power is on. I should be able to connect to it. So I will keep it like this. And then in order to trigger the standalone mode, you need to press the button for a couple seconds. And you greet it with a LED show. And on the computer screen, it tells you that the standalone mode has started. I will remake this one in order to show you. There you go. Perfect. In order to show you how it looks like when you connect it to a device, I unplug the USB connector. So I have Proxmark. It is not in the standalone mode now, but I will press the button and you see on the screen that the device has been sending me some debug messages saying that it's in a standalone mode. So remember, now this device can only do what it's told to do. And that was before, when I looked at it, using the default things in the 14C, that was 14A sniffing, and then it would save a trace file. So I will need to do this. I will bring out a reader. Like that. I will bring out a card, with wellness, but it doesn't matter because it's there. And I will present the Proxmark to the reader. And then I will press the button once. I'll go to see here again. I will press the button once in order to make it exit the standalone mode. Here you get a whole heap of information from the device now because we connect you over USB. If you were to do this, blank and blindly, you wouldn't see this data, or you wouldn't know this. I know this. It also gives you here, tells you that we saved all this into this file called the trace file. And it says spiffs. This is how you download that one. And then you can later on load it up into the trace commands, and you can then look at that trace. However, as of now, since it's powered on and we haven't done anything, we can still look at the data that is stored in the trace log on the device directly from now, because this is us practicing, okay? And we can look how it's sniffed. Great. And we can of course save that file, but we don't need to do trace save, but we could have done it here. What I want to do is go back to the mem spiffs to see what happened in this part of the device. And here you see that it stored this trace file. What we're actually looking here is actually also stored on the external flash memory on the device right now. So that is the instructions you see here that you can download. Oh, where is it? Here. Retrieve the data from the flash once you've done that. So this is how you download that trace to your local computer. And then you would use this command to load it up in the client Proxmark client later on when you would need to look at it and analyze it. All right, we go back here. So we have a trace file there. We can do a mem spiffs just because of it. I'm just going to show you help tags. Source is this file. And I want a destination. I want to call it HF UNISNIFF 14A demo trace. Alright, so now I have a file in the dumps works. That's where I store things. I can do data clear. That means that there is no data on the device side. I want to do this 14. Nothing. That means that I can now do the example of loading that downloaded trace file like this. And it did. Now I can go up and do a list again, but in order to tell it to use the data that is already loaded in the memory on the client here, I need to add the parameter -1, like it says here, remember. And I do this, and we see the same trace log as it was collected before. If I want to do and look at this, since this is a MIFAR, I can actually decode the annotations as MIFAR Classic, and it will give you a little bit better annotations here. I can make a little bit less. You see it tried to authenticate, but it failed. All right, so clear it up to recuperate spiffs 3. I have a trace file. I have triggered the standalone mode, and I looked at it. Let's go into the idea of that config file that I mentioned before. That means that we can set things up before. Let's see, more HF UNISNIFF conf user. We don't want to have a user. Let's say I want to do. So we got an iClass config file set. This is not. I don't need to I didn't need to recompile the whole project and then flash it to a device. Given this, I just upload this configuration file. And they don't tell you how to do this, but basically you need to have that same file name. Go into spiffs and you'll choose the upload option. We look at the help text and you say source file is this one from here. And the destination file is the same thing. You press enter and it uploads those bytes to it. We can now look at spiffs 3 to see that we have a config file laying there. All right. Now, in order to get some more debug statements, we can use the HW debug-3. Remember -3 because this is the level that's needed for this particular mode to give you more details. I will do this to press that. There's another command called HW Standalone, and it allows to send and trigger some data to trigger device from inside the client, so I don't have to press the button to do this. So I can actually trigger the standalone mode from here, and let's do that. You will see here, that the device will enter the standalone mode. You see it because of the LED show, and you also see this now. It says that it was compiled for 14A, the default protocol to sniff. And it also says now, because we have a runtime configured with the configuration file we uploaded, that it's going to sniff iClass, and the new mode is, the save mode is a new file. It doesn't append. Okay? So the device is on a iClass sniffing mode. Let's go over to the Ziggy part here. I will take an iClass card and I will present it to the reader. I will do it twice, just in case. I will press the button once. And you see, since we have the bug mode enabled, we got a little bit more text messages, but don't worry about that. The interesting part is that you have a trace length of 755 bytes, and it's called Uniclass trace now, that it wrote to flash memory. It gives you instructions how to download it from the device flash memory to your local PC client, and then it tells you how to load it locally later on. So, but we can actually, like I showed before, run this directly right now from a device because we connected to it, and it gives you this whole collected sniff with what was going on. That's a powerful thing. You can just swap the sniffing between that, and that's cool. So data clear again. We don't have anything in here. We do the data load, and we're gonna load this here. No, we can't because when we download it, we have to go in as spiffs. Spiffs, nothing else, was it? Save. And we go this, and we go destination, it's the same thing. Right, we downloaded that one. Now we can do a trace load file. And we can load it up in the trace, and it loaded it up. All good. Now we can go trace list -1 -t iClass because that's what we want to annotate it as, and you see that we got all of this trace list available. If we go into memspiffs3, we can see that we now have 3 files: the 48 sniffs before, the iClass sniff that we just did, and that's the configuration file. So it keeps on going. If I would do another iClass sniff, it will just be named it HF_sniff iClass 001. It can do that until 999 files. So that's cool. All right. But this is not cool per se. What we do need to do is run this without the client. Let's do like this. We need to run this without the client in pure standalone mode. So let's do that. I will show you how it looks like. I will now disconnect the Proxmark. I will, it was on before, so let's disconnect it instead, all right? So that's on. It's now battery powered. It's not in standalone mode. I press the button for 3 seconds. I'm greeted with that nice little LED show. So now it's in the standalone mode. And now it's in the sniffing mode. And remember that we're now inside the user configuration file what we did, and we told it to sniff iClass. I will take an iClass card and put onto my Proxmark. I will now present it to the reader 1, 2, 3 times. Oh, it beeps like that. And then I will press once on the button. It shows and indicates that it did writing, and then now it's outside. It's not in standalone mode. I will hook up the Proxmark with a cable. I will swap over to terminal. I will start the Proxmark up like this. It connects, and now I can see memspiffs3. I have one more extra trace like 001 like this. I also have, if I ask for it, because I haven't done anything with the device, it hasn't restarted, the battery power was still on all the time, and it exited, and the trace is still there in the RAM memory of your device. So this works even if you don't have a flash. As long as you don't, if you have a flash, you can turn off your Proxmark, but if you don't have a flash, you need to have it powered on until you connect it to a Proxmark client again to extract the data. So we have all that stuff here. mimspx3, and if I want to download that one, I would do dump, and that would be source, and that would be, let's mark this one up, and I will have a destination, the same thing. Oops, it doesn't like the extra spaces here, it only likes one space, remember that. Boom, that's saved. Data clear, it means that there's nothing in the device memory. Device memory is clear, the RAM memory is empty, I don't have anything like that. If I mark this one, do trace load F5 this, and then I do trace list -1, and I want to do look at the I class. -1 means that I want to do the locally loaded file, and here we go, you see all this trace. So this is a very powerful standalone mode, and it becomes powerful because of the easy way of changing it with config file. If you have your Android phone and use Termux and you do it, upload config file and change it, that's super simple. You don't need to recompile it, so I like it. I'm not covering all the details with the save options, where you can append to an existing trace file, or like we did now. I showed you how to just configure it with the I class and 14A. We didn't show, or I didn't show you the user mode, where I can press the button to see which mode it should be sniffing in and then use it that way. It's more complex and it's much easier to see the debug messages in. You would need to memorize all these patterns and single button presses that you need to do this. So I'm not going to show you that in this video. Smash that like button and please subscribe, and feel free to support me on my Patreon as well. Let me know in the comments below about your own experiences in trying to run a standalone mode in Proxmark.